Hey there, I'm Chris, and thank you for tuning in to Duck Bricks. And this is, well, the most fun I've had with a single LEGO set in ages. This is LEGO set 8364 Multi-Challenge Racetrack. It was part of the very unique and special track system line of sets that LEGO had set up all the way back in 2003. Now, LEGO only ever produced 3 track system related sets, and of course, I had to try my hand out at the flagship set, the Multi-Challenge Racetrack. And let me say, I was so impressed and happy with the set that I went ahead and bought the other 2 sets immediately. So, thank you all for tuning into Duck Bricks, and let's get into a brand new episode of a brand new series, Bizarre LEGO Reviews, where I review LEGO oddities, strange toys, and other explorations that LEGO was doing that pushed themselves outside the boundaries of what can be considered LEGO. Whether it be Galador, or stuff like this Racer's Track, or even some of the girl-oriented themes like Belleville and Scala, there is a ton of obscure and bizarre LEGO sets waiting to be reviewed. And that's why I'm here, because I will review what the other reviewers won't. Thank you all for tuning in, and let's take a look at set number 8364 Multi-Challenge Racetrack. Alright, so getting into this set, obviously you can see that it is mostly made up of really large and blocky pieces, but I first kind of have to explain what exactly the concept of this set is and how it works. As you'll notice, there are 2 electronic charging stations on one and the other side of the track, and essentially the way that you're supposed to set it up is that you get yourself and you get a friend and you can essentially race them against each other. The way that points are tallied is that there's a little infrared sensor right over here that as soon as a car passes, it notices that it has made a lap, and essentially it just passes by. Now, there are a few problems with the system, but just a few minutes of playing allowed me to come up with a ton of really fun and unique solutions to get around these problems in terms of just having fun with a friend or playing to keep score. The way this works is that every person will turn on by pressing the black button on the receiver here, and as soon as you press it down, all you need to do is take the car, which is a very special piece, only used in this set. The bottom piece of it is this motorized kind of wheelbase here, and there's 3 metal contacts on the bottom. How it works is that you press it down to charge it up, and actually we'll be getting into the electronics of how this works later on in the review, but just in terms of a toy demonstration, you press down on the car, and a little red light will light up as it charges. Essentially what you then have to do is just wait until that red light kind of dims or goes away, and that's how you know that the car is ready to go. Once it's ready, you can lift off this starting banner right here, and then go. There's a few things you can do, like having it go around a loop, or even having it go over bumps over here, and a jump over there. All in all, it's a really fun set and a really unique concept for a LEGO set. And when it's done, when you notice it's getting a little bit slow, all you need to do is move the divider here to start the next charge of the car. As you can see, it's pretty fun just kind of watching it going around, but obviously that can get boring after a little while. The real fun goes when you have another person and you actually have to race each other, because how it works then is that both people would charge up their cars at these stations and then potentially have them loop around, and the really fun part of it is seeing how far can you push your car without having the battery die and without having to wait to recharge. Let's say, for example, my car is going quickly around the track, and I figure, maybe it's time to recharge. I'm gonna recall it back to my charging station over here. Then I could waste valuable time charging my car while my opponent's car continues around the track. However, let's say my opponent tries to have their car go around the track for too long and the charge starts to die. What if it slows down just around here? Well, then they got really nothing else to do, because essentially that would mean that they would lose and the other person would win. You can immediately see there's all sorts of really fun stuff that you can do with this, and what's also really fun is that it's not just an event that you kind of watch on your own and you just set the cars off and let them go. Every time the car passes around, there's something active for someone to do. Maybe you decide with a friend that you'll get an extra point if you decide to push this barrier down and have it continue around the loop a few times before going around the main loop. Or maybe you're trying to provide some obstacles to slow down your friend, so you activate some of the buttons here next to your own personal charging station to slow them down. For instance, this one here pauses a ramp to come up from the bottom of the floor so the car can jump the ramp, but if it's not going fast enough, that could cause it to get stuck. The same goes for here, where pressing the ramp activates a much more complex feature that causes the road to actually become a little bit bumpy, which, unless the car is going at full speed, is surprisingly difficult to overcome. Even over here, as we move along to this one, you can press this lever here to instigate a divider down to maybe stop your opponent right in their tracks. There's a ton of really fun stuff around here, and honestly, this is just the base model, because there were quite a few expansions and add-on models to this that actually included legitimate obstacle courses to get through. And if there's enough interest in this video, I'll definitely be recording a review of those and combining all of the tracks into one segment, if enough people are interested in seeing more of this concept. Now, to get into how exactly these cars work. Now, I personally am all about using Lego and Lego products to learn as much as I can. And I think this was a really great example because actually I am currently studying electrical engineering as one of my majors in college. As such, I was really dying to get my hands on this because I just honestly wanted to take it apart and see how it worked, because I had no idea how this whole system was set up. I originally assumed that it was a rechargeable battery inside the cars, but after I unscrewed it and actually took everything apart, I was completely shocked to see that they actually came up with a much more innovative solution. Instead, they used a capacitor, and there are a lot of reasons as to why that's good. For instance, a rechargeable battery can eventually lose its charge after many recharges, but a capacitor is much harder to wear out. Second of all, capacitors are much cheaper and easy to get than a rechargeable battery, especially one that can fit in a car of this size. So essentially, if it breaks down, all it would take is a little bit of soldering and rewiring to actually get it back up and running to full capacity. And finally, the really great thing about a capacitor is the rapid charge time. You'll notice that all I had to do was just press it down on the plate for just a few seconds before it immediately starts to want to take off and go. So for those of you who do not know how a capacitor works, I'm going to explain this in as simple terms as possible. Imagine that you have a power source and you've got electricity flowing in a loop. Well, a capacitor is something that is placed in the middle of that loop, and essentially what it does is that it absorbs the energy going in. As soon as the capacitor level is full, it allows the energy to flow through with just a little bit of resistance to prevent a short circuit. Now, the really cool thing about the way that this circuit is set up is that, as I mentioned, you've got this indicator light on your dial here that tells you when your car is fully charged. So they have this circuit set up where the electricity is first coursing through that LED, through that light, while the capacitor is open and receiving charge. However, as the capacitor slowly fills, the power that's going through that LED slowly lessens. So the moment that you know that the capacitor is full, the LED is basically turned off or very dim. That's how you know that you have a full charge on your car. It's a very simple but very clever way of engineering this. And honestly, outside of stuff like obviously Mindstorms or Technic Control Plus, which are built to be very complex and work with your phone and be Bluetooth enabled, this is a very simple solution that honestly anyone could build with a few cheap electronics parts and actually get it to work in such a degree that this does. It's just a really simple and clever solution that I'm honestly very impressed the LEGO designers thought of. But now that I've explained exactly how to play with this and how the electronics behind the cars work, it's probably a good time to get into the actual build of this model and start to conduct a typical review of how this is put together and how good it is as a play model. So let's move in a little bit closer here and start to take a look at exactly how this track is built. Alright, so as we move into here, you'll notice that each track is made up of an individual track segment. It's almost very similar to the monorail sets, honestly, and even some of the more modern track systems, because every single piece is essentially just connected by Technic pins. I'll demonstrate that by separating these two pieces here. And you'll notice that there are just two Technic pins holding together everything, and it's a very simple attachment point. So essentially, you can build your own tracks if you had enough pieces, and that's exactly what the instruction manual encourages. Look at how thick this instruction manual is. This is one of the thickest ones I've seen in a standard retail set, and there's a reason for it. It actually gives you full instructions to make alternate tracks which completely repurpose all of the parts in this build. One of my favorites, and I actually do want to try as soon as I actually get the parts for it, is the second one shown off. Let me just try to get that up here. You'll notice immediately that it's a very interesting kind of crosswalk archway area where this doesn't even employ a track, but actually has the cars ride on Technic beams. I really want to try that one out myself now. So this is the final track of the kind of Circle 8 view you can see here. I actually haven't built this myself yet, but this one looks really interesting. And the other thing I really like about this is that it requires a complete disassemble of everything. Because obviously you've got these custom system ramps and whatnot that are built into it. You actually need to repurpose and rebuild the entire thing for a completely different experience. So it's not like you're just say moving around the track layout and just repurposing things to make for a very simple rebuild. There's actually a lot of potential in this rebuild system, and the more tracks you have, the more possibilities you can do with it. The other really nice thing is that you can actually swap out the colors of the cars. You'll notice here when the instruction manual starts off, it tells you to build one car, but you've actually got 4 different options. Moving on to here, there are 2 different options for the red car. And then there's 2 different options as well for the yellow wheeled car, this orange one here, and the blue one that I showed you all the way up at the front. Taking a look at the cars themselves, they are very simple and actually use a very common piece that was commonly used in the standard LEGO Racers line around that time. Some of you may not be familiar with this piece, but it's essentially just a tiny little minifigure gripping a steering wheel, and you can see these are his feet kind of sticking up. It's a very cute piece, honestly. I really do like this piece. They have it so that you can very easily remove it from studs, so there's no significant anti-studs on the bottom, and you can even open the visor to reveal a very serious and concentrated minifigure face right there. Now, the cars are obviously very simple to put together. It's literally just this car base, and then you just stick parts on top of it. So theoretically, you could build any sort of car you wanted from this layout. What's really cool about the track that you may not have noticed is that there's actually a special texture to allow the wheels to really grip the pieces here. As you'll notice, as I move along the track, it's a little bit hard to make out from this camera angle in particular, but if I can get the light to shine on it, you can very clearly see that the middle surface, which is the surface right here alongside the middle, is a very different texture than the sides of the roads, which are actually specially textured to allow cars to easily drive along them. It's a pretty special feature, and I'm sure that helped a lot with the grip of the cars because I've never once had an issue with the car wheels slipping. They always just roll along perfectly on the track. Now, the way that these things are set up here is that they're very simple rubber band-like Technic mechanisms. And there's actually a little bit of a con here, I will say. It's so simple to the point where you can see you literally just press down this lever and it'll cause the track to switch, so that works perfectly. But if you have it hanging off the edge of the table like I do here, you can very easily accidentally, while you're switching it, cause it to go out of whack, which then renders this lever useless, and I'd have to manually push this back and loop it back underneath. Obviously, if it's on a solid platform, that's not a big deal because it's made to perfectly act as a switch exactly when this hits the ground level here. So when I hit the ground level, it perfectly switches to the other side. I honestly would have probably liked to see some sort of a mechanism, or heck, even just an extension of the plate to prevent it from actually looping underneath if you have it touching the ground, but that is a very minor con. The same mechanism works essentially the same way here. You can see right here, you can lower the barrier. And over here, pushing this lever, let's see, right here works the exact same way to flip the switch. What's a little bit more interesting are these side builds here. And honestly, these are the most actual LEGO construction you will do in the set. These are 2 very different styles of ramps, and honestly, this one works a lot better than the other one as a ramp, whereas this one works a lot better than the other one as an actual obstacle. This one here is very simple. Literally, you press down on this, and it opens up to reveal this kind of ramp that the cars can drive off of. In fact, it's so simple of a mechanism, it literally just relies on gravity. You just press this, and gravity causes it to revert back to its original position. Super, super simple, but not bad. It works well, and I like it, and it's pretty sturdy. Now, they went a little bit more ambitious with this one, which is both a good and a bad thing. You see, pushing down on this causes it to cause 2 ramps to lift up right here, which actually acts more like bumps in the road, but you'll notice that when it automatically resets, it's not quite perfect. There's one ramp that's a little bit higher than the other, and these pieces are only attached by very few elements on the back. So you really kind of have to line it up, get it perfectly right in order to get it back straight again. The moment you activate the feature again, then you essentially just have it sticking up permanently. The other thing is that this is extremely flimsy. It's only held in, obviously, by these two system stud pieces around the sides. And actually, I'm going to try to remove it so you can take a look at the build here. This is a very, very flimsy build because obviously these can just rotate however you want. It literally just works by pressing this lever and causing them to spin. And look at that, parts are already falling off and I just picked it up. This obviously isn't meant to stand on its own without the support of the frames actually keeping these black pieces in place. It is super, super easy to just get out of whack, and unfortunately that's not something that's really great about the set. The building is really not there. The build quality, the build style of the pieces is not really what you'd expect in a modern Lego set for sure, and even some of the Lego sets of that time, this is relatively flimsier than a lot of the other ones. So just keep that in mind if you do want to get the set. It is going to be a little bit of a pain just to keep together and transport, although once you set it up in one spot, it's not going to break because the tracks are actually adhered pretty sturdily across. They also included a ton of stickers, which I have tried to place in the exact positions that it showcases on the instruction manual, although some of these stickers did come already applied to my set. It was a used set, so not all of them are perfect, but generally you can see it's pretty close to the track that's displayed right here. This is the most interesting part of the set. Arguably, it is the exclusive piece to the set, only appeared here, and it is the charging base station for the bottoms of these cars. So you'll notice that down here, there's just a screw for a battery pack, and there's also screws to take it apart. And I actually have not attempted to take this apart yet. I only took apart these, but I probably will be at some point, although I do have a pretty good idea of how exactly the circuit works for this. You'll notice that this is just basically attached on a spring. The bottom track pieces indent to allow you to place a car on the top and press down to actually charge. The way this actually works is that you have to press the button to turn it on. You'll notice right here that light turned on. You take a car, and as soon as you press it down, you'll notice that this light began to turn on. Now, as I said, as soon as that light turns off, then your car is ready to go. It actually lasts for quite a while on even a short charge or even just a partial charge. You'll notice that removing the car here, after just a quick charge, the light is still on. Gives you quite a lot of power, and this thing will just keep going. In fact, if I just place it upside down here, you'll notice the wheels just keep on spinning, and that actually gives it a lot of power. This is because of the capacitor that I was mentioning earlier, being able to be very quickly recharged and discharged like so, and actually allows it to store quite a lot of charge from a short amount of charging time. As you can see, it is still going, which is pretty crazy. Let's just let it run off to the back of the wall here. And you can see it still is going after all of that time, still trying to move forward. So definitely a very powerful charging mechanism, and one that works out very, very well, surprisingly so even. This entire rechargeable car system was only used in this one set, which I do feel is a bit of a shame because honestly, this idea has a lot of potential and definitely could be used for a lot of other applications. Just imagine, say, a train that used this feature, or heck, even a monorail could use a feature like this to be continually recharged and then blast around the track. The possibilities are endless. It's been over a minute and it's still going. So definitely a lot of really great stuff to see here. And you actually do get 2 of these cars in the set. But now the one last thing I want to show with the rechargeable base is that turning it back on, you'll notice the lap indicator here. That's because of a very nice infrared sensor that notates as soon as cars pass by. As you can see, as I swipe my finger across, the light moved to the next point. If I do it again, it has to be moving at the exact right spot, like so, moves to the next point, like so, here, and it actually needs to be going at a relative speed, so I can't just cover up the sensor and hope it works. I actually have to be mimicking the motion of a car as it's driving past. So definitely a lot of work that was put into making sure this entire system works well, and actually works as an accurate counter of laps, which totally was not needed, but is definitely something really cool. Once it reaches the end there, you can just reset it by pressing the button and then start the whole course over again. But then moving along from this charging piece here, I want to show you just one of the track pieces because essentially once you've seen one of them, you've seen them all. Here is one of the representative track pieces. I've removed the Technic stuff that actually is causing this to move back and forth. And essentially you can see that it's basically just a standard type track element, a very large piece. And then you can see that it's a very actually hollow piece on the other side, which has these curves that allow the racers to pass by and move and navigate alongside the curves. This piece right here is also a very unique piece that's used in the set. Sometimes it is oriented on the floor this way to move fully like across like so, and sometimes it's rotated upside down and used like this. They even use this piece as a piece of the ramp to bump the cars up. So definitely a very versatile piece. I'd honestly love to see someone try to integrate this into, say, a Bionicle mop, because I feel like there's quite a few different things that you could do with a piece like this, and it's also a shame that this really only appeared in these sets because it was made specifically for this track system. It allows cars to very easily and nicely maneuver around tracks without getting stuck at any given points. But this is essentially how the track system works. Again, I mentioned that it connects via these Technic pins here. Now I'm going to put this track back and let's take a look at the quote-unquote minifigures and other vehicles and cars of this set. This right here is the ramp piece that I've separated out. It is very easily maneuvered like so. And it's a very simple function that honestly doesn't work all too well because of course you can very easily just get these out of whack. It's only really attached by these very loose Technic pieces here, which actually are not adhered to even each other. So it's a very strange system. I think I do prefer the other ramp a little bit better, but this one definitely is a lot more complex. They were trying to go for a lot more different stuff with this. I'm just not sure if it was executed the best way. This right here is the good ramp. All you need to do is press down on this. It's relatively sturdy and it causes for some very satisfying motion as the cars are going around the tracks. They leap off and actually get some airtime if they're going fast enough. So a very fun piece to put there. As you can see, it's a very simple build as well. Literally the most basic possible of Technic frames, just pieced together to allow for a very simple function. But now moving on to the cars themselves and the figures. So let's actually take off these figures so we can look at them individually. What I really do like is that they've actually color-coded the helmets and the cars to match up with these exact figures. So taking a look at them one by one, we have this green and red racer with surprisingly an M logo. I kind of wish that was the M-tron logo, but unfortunately the colors aren't quite right. His head is the standard kind of bandana head that they used in most of the racer sets. Actually, quite a lot of the racer sets around this era used prints like this. And then if you are interested in how the body piece looks without a head, it's a little bit shorter than a standard minifigure neck, but you can very clearly see the outline of someone sitting there and gripping a steering wheel, which is something I find kind of funny. What's really great is that when paired with his vehicle, the helmet matches up perfectly with the special print on this piece, which allows it to feel like it really matches even on a vehicle as small as this. The color scheme is also perfectly matching the color of the wheels, the color of the body, and the color of the helmet, which makes this a very cohesive build. The next racer up here is a more bluish, yellowish, and black color scheme. He, interestingly enough, uses a completely different face with some hair-suggested detailing on the top there, because of course he is wearing a helmet. It's a very stylized face that's very unlike the standard minifigure faces today. You definitely wouldn't see a face like this, but again, if we are to remove the head here, this is a very interesting piece. You can see the outline of the hands gripping the wheels, someone sitting in the seat, and the suggestion of feet that are pointing up. So again, a very cute piece, almost like a chibi minifigure that's seated down on a seat here. And then putting the helmet back, we again get an exclusive printing for the helmet that matches up perfectly with something they did even more special for this car, which was create exclusive printed elements on the side to match up with the helmet. Now this level of detail is honestly really above and beyond what I was expecting for just a tiny little car. You can see that not only did they print this, but they also printed these separately. And no, these are actually mirrored. So these are not the same part. They actually are completely mirrored, so these are two separate prints. They definitely didn't need to do that, especially in a set that's filled with a massive sticker sheet, but it's still a really nice touch and something that I feel sets this car apart from many of the others. But then let's reassemble the cars to give us the next two. All right, so here we have the cars rebuilt into completely different color schemes. Now, starting off with this guy right here, we've got another unique print for the helmet with a very special kind of silver, red, and black printing there. And when you remove the helmet, it is another unique face with a very silly facial expression. Putting that helmet back on, you've again seen this part many times by now. We can place him on his vehicle, which also is one of the ones that got two unique prints for the vehicle. You've got this special print on the front, which mimics the helmet, and then some extra detailing on the side, which adds some visual flair. I actually really quite like this one because it again includes two unique printed elements. Not quite as fancy as the blue one, which had three, but this is still pretty good. Although it is a bit of a traditional build, nothing too fun or crazy going on here. I actually kind of prefer the build of the green one, which actually tried to do something different with the whole bar element kind of acting as a roll cage. I actually really did like the way that the green one was built, although I do actually like the attention to detail, the color scheme, and the unique printed parts of this black one. Moving on to this orange and yellow one. To be honest, this is probably one of my least favorite ones out of the four. I think that obviously only having one print detracts it a little bit, although it is a nice print, which does correlate again with the helmet on this minifigure, who has another very unique facial expression. It almost kind of reminds me of the Aquazone and Aqua Raiders headpieces, where they had this red bandana around their heads and had a kind of wacky facial expression like that. But you can see his helmet is actually pretty cool. It has this fireball symbol that matches the front of his car. But once it's placed in the car, again, there's nothing too crazy going on with this one. It's just kind of a standard build, and I actually do think I prefer the blue and yellow one a little bit better because that one actually had a lot of unique printed elements versus this one, which just has the one, although it is printed quite well with even some silver going alongside those engine holes right there. But now that we have built all four cars and shown off the quote-unquote figures of this set, now is probably a good time to transition over to the final part of the review, where I give my final thoughts on this set and specifically the value. Alright, so let's get into the closing thoughts of this review. As I mentioned at the start of this video, this is some of the most fun I've had with a LEGO set in a long time. It's been really fun just simply watching the race cars travel around the track, trying to see how many times they can make it around without the battery dying, and most importantly, activating all of the little traps, the little ramps, and the track adjustments which alter their courses pretty dramatically. Now, the big question though is value. So personally, I just paid $100 USD for this on bricklink.com, although I paid probably a little bit more for shipping. It probably ended up being around 120 or so. Now, the original retail price of this set, 8364 in 2003, was $89.99 US dollars, so essentially $90 US dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that translates to $125 today. Now the question is this worth $125 retail? Honestly, I'm going to say it depends on exactly what you're wanting to get out of a LEGO set. If you're looking for a good building experience with an amazing display piece and something that you can look at, admire, and put on a shelf, this obviously is not the right set for you. Go spend $125 on some of the newer LEGO 18 Plus sets if you want a display piece or a really fun and cool building experience. However, if you are not really too interested or care too much about how complex the build is, and really are just looking for a LEGO set to have fun with and play around with, and potentially get a feel of some interesting concepts that LEGO tried out for one set, but never actually pursued in the future, this is definitely the set to get. Because I will say that I was very impressed with how this function worked, but I can imagine how some people who were diehard fans of LEGO were not convinced, especially because the argument could be made that, is this really even LEGO? Because of course you just have these massive track pieces that you stick together, minimal building for the traps here, and honestly these traps and ramps are pretty flimsy, so it's not like they're really that great of a construction build here, and very basic style type start lights, and just some very standard Technic stuff, mostly just to activate systems in the most bare-bone ways possible. So it's not really as much of a building experience as it is a complete toy to play with. And this is one of the LEGO sets where the most fun you're going to get out of it is by playing with it after it's built. Usually it sometimes is the other way around. For example, as I was building a set like, say, Ninjago City Gardens, the build was the most fun thing about the set, because obviously once it's done, it's just a display piece. But building it allowed me to experience each of the individual rooms and place details in places that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise. For this set, as I was building it, the only thing I could think of is, man, I can't wait to finish this and get it up and running so I can try out and see how it works in real life. So there's definitely that aspect that you have to consider about it too. But I do kind of want to talk about value here and exactly how this would be priced today. So this set was $125 adjusted for inflation. Now let's say LEGO wants to release this set today. They have to make a brand new mold for the whole battery box thing, a brand new completely separate electronic component that really is made for this set in the form of both the recharging spaces and the cars. They have to come up with all the new molds for the tracks, and granted they did reuse these in 3 other sets. There were 2 other track system sets and one of them showed up in a Spider-Man set. But still, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 new molds. So that's completely new molds, and these aren't tiny molds either. These aren't like minifigure molds. These are large blocky pieces that really can only be used for sets like this. You can't really use a part like this in another standard LEGO set. It's essentially just been made for this system. So you're introducing an entirely new track system. That's going to cost quite a lot as well. And to even add on to that, you're introducing a ton of uniquely printed minifigure helmets, of which there are 4 in the sets. You're introducing a ton of uniquely printed car elements. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new printed car elements here. And all in all, you're actually also costing designers to come up with a ton of different alternate models for it, and also to have this essentially work and be play tested as a fully functioning toy. If a set like this were to come out today, which it wouldn't because LEGO is not nearly this experimental nowadays, but if it would, I can imagine this costing over $200, if not $250. Imagine the amount that LEGO charges for electronic stuff today. For example, I recently bought a LEGO Technic set that I could control from my iPhone, Bluetooth controlled everything. The big selling point were the motors and the battery box. It set me back $130 for a car that otherwise would be around $50 or $60. They're basically charging $60, $70 plus for just electronic components. Now granted, those are far more complex because they have a Bluetooth chip in them, but still, the amount of development work that would have gone into this probably increases the price quite a lot. And now the closest thing that we have as an analog to this today are the LEGO City road plates. These right here are the new LEGO City road plates. If you connect them like so, this is basically the $20 LEGO road plate set minus a few accessories here and there. So you can see that this only has really 2 different molds, a larger plate and a smaller plate, and just some random prints. Now compare that to the racetrack itself, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. It's not even counting the new electronics they developed for the set, not even counting the electronic car bases, not counting the new prints for the minifigures. So all in all, I feel like honestly, paying $100 for this is kind of a steal compared to what LEGO would charge for something like this today. Now, of course, maybe you could go a little bit less on the road plates, like let's say they cost $5, but still, that's over almost $100 worth of just plates, not counting electronics. So all in all, I think that charging $125 in today's price is a very reasonable cost for this set. And honestly, I can probably see why it didn't do quite well and LEGO tried to shelve the idea. $125 was probably quite a lot for someone to be paying for something as experimental as this, and I'm not even sure exactly how much profit LEGO was making, having to pay so many designers to think up of the electronics for these pieces, get the system honed down to the point where it works perfectly, and all in all just produce all of these new molds for just a very limited use set like this. So, would the set come out today? Absolutely not. But if it would, I'd certainly buy it. And if I were you and you're interested in anything like this, I'd actually highly recommend going on Bricklink and trying to buy them, because this set is so rare, it's so limited, that not very many people are selling it, and I actually got one of the only working ones on Bricklink. The rest of them either do not include the cars, do not have functioning charging stations, or some combination of the two, which essentially neuters the value of them quite significantly because honestly, what are you really going to do with this without motorized cars? Sure, I guess you can drive them around manually with your hands, but is that really that fun to just manually drive a car around? I don't really think so. So what you're getting is really making sure that both the motors and the charging stations need to work when you're getting this off of Bricklink. I'd highly recommend picking them up before they disappear, and I hope that more people actually get exposed to sets like this because this was such a fun build, such a fun thing to play with, and definitely something I'm very interested in looking at the other sets in the line because I was so impressed by how fun this set was. And so that about wraps up my thoughts on the set. And of course, this is a very different video than what I normally do for the channel. I'm really trying to evolve this channel into something that more fits a general broad range of LEGO. Obviously, there's a big focus on Bionicle and on Ninjago, but I'd love to get this channel to focus on a lot of different aspects of LEGO as well, especially stuff like this, which most people are not too familiar with. I'm not expecting this video to do too well because, I mean, no one's looking for a review of the multi-challenge racetrack, but I am hoping that for the people that do see this video, your eyes will be open to a new style of LEGO building and potentially consider trying to pick up one of these sets or something like these sets sometime down the line and share the love for LEGO and especially their more vintage and bizarre things that they've tried. But this definitely will not be the last bizarre LEGO review, so stay tuned to Duckbricks for even more bizarre LEGO reviews coming whenever I get the chance to find something interesting. And actually, if you want, down in the comments, if you could let me know what kinds of bizarre LEGO do you want to see me review on this channel. This could be Galador, it could be Belleville, Scala, really anything is fair game, Fabuland, whatever. Let me know down in the comments below. Is there a bizarre LEGO set like this that you want me to try out and review to show all of you how it works, and I'll see what I can do. Thank you all for tuning in, and stay tuned to Duckbricks for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.